we are on that, aren't we technically employees of the village? Are we not covered by? Like. Okay, so out there cutting up trees is not.
They're all very interested.
So, YouTube link. YouTube link.
Yeah, oh, I didn't send it to you.
This is an engaged council.
I'm not engaged. I'm engaged.
High on the engagement scale. That's going back to 2017, my HR stuff. Yes, yeah, citizen. You're an engaged resident and voter.
She should be a vice council. Or
Put her in charge of vice for the council.
Or junior.
She's the boss.
Send it to you. Do it like you told us.
Okay. You stand for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Grant us, O Lord, light to our understanding, prudence in our investigating, foresight in our planning, sincerity in our deliberating, grace to follow truth in our judgment. Help us to be moved in our decision, neither by fear nor by self-interest, but to dwell with faithful. May we respect the authority vested in us. Without the source of all authority, may we use it in our directives for the common good, for the honor and glory. Amen. Call to order. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Joyce.
Here.
Mr. Joyce.
Here.
Mr. Conrad.
Here.
Thank you. Okay. The purpose of this Parks Committee meeting is to discuss about beach access and parcel A, so I'll turn it over to Margaret Joyce, who's Chair Committee.
Thank you, Mayor. This meeting was called at the request of Kevin Thompson, so I'm going to turn it over to Kevin so that he can bring forward what he has in his mind.
Thank you, Chair Joyce. First, I'd like to thank our Chairwoman Joyce for calling this meeting, as well as everybody for attending. There's a lot to go over, so I've prepared some structured notes for myself, and I would like to read to completion my findings and the argument. Did you want to speak beforehand? I wasn't sure if you were standing up for that.
Oh, no, there's no.
No, we only have this, we have this really small. These are my personal notes. Anyway, I would like to share my findings and my argument beforehand, before we get into discussion, so we don't end up going down rabbit holes and end up on topics that I intend to bring up along the way. I'd appreciate that. I did give you some handouts, but you don't have to go through them because they might not make sense until I get to them. I'm going to get to them anyway and go through them one by one. So I'm not even on the Parks Committee, so why do I want to talk about this? Well, it is an issue that comes up yearly, and we've had a number of our constituents, our voters, who come to us inquiring about why they can't access the parcel A, the beach area, if they're renters. So I think we owe it to them as their elected representatives to explore that and see what we can do, if there's anything we can rectify that, and do some fact finding on the history of parcel A. The history of parcel A is long and complex. I've attempted to read every piece of literature that I could finding regarding parcel A, the original deed restrictions, the original intent, and subsequent court cases. My goal here, and I think what council's goal should be, is to make sure that all of our fellow villagers have access to parts of the village that they are paying to maintain. And that we are not discriminating against a subset of villagers. I had a fact-finding session with Mayor Mara, going through the history and where we find ourselves now regarding parcel A. I cannot speak for the mayor, but I believe he generally agrees that all villagers should be treated fairly. Which is important because the mayor's support is important since enforcement falls to the executive branch. I'd like to stress that this is not about opening up the floodgates and overwhelming our treasured beats to just anyone and everyone. To my knowledge, Timberlake has less than 30 houses that are rented, many of whom may never intend to even use the beach. So this is not talking about letting in 100 people, everyone from the surrounding communities, tearing down the gate. This is just our fellow villagers who are renters, which is a very small percentage of Timberlake residents. Yet all of whom do contribute to Timberlake in some manner, are potential voters, and specifically contribute to the maintenance of parcel A through income taxation in the general fund. They call Timberlake home, and they should be made to feel at home and welcome. How can we expect people to have a sense of community and join clubs and volunteer to help out if we deny them some aspects of what makes Timberlake great? And again, that they are also paying to maintain. There has been much talk about the original deed restrictions and recent court decisions, as if there were not many contradictions and inconsistency throughout the history of the plot of land that has been subject to multiple court cases, multiple entities as its trustees, such as a club at one time, individuals such as our first mayor, and the village of Timberlake. From this point, I'm going to use the terms lot owner, lot buyer, home, and property owners interchangeably because they are in this particular instance. One of the more interesting contradictions is that it appears originally the maintenance of parcel A was through special assessments. And it was required that you'd be up to date on paying those assessments to be granted access. Are we going to follow the original intent and do that? Are we going to make sure everyone who steps foot on parcel A do not owe any back taxes? Of course not. And I quote from the earlier Ohio Supreme Court findings, it was clearly the intention of the parties that those who paid the assessment should be entitled to the use of the park. We no longer pay these special assessments to maintain parcel A. That was replaced with using the general funds. And it sounds like to me that the clear intention was those who paid the maintenance should be entitled to use of the park, which would include all property and income tax paying residents, which would effectively be every household. So in the beginning, they actually had to pay, lot owners and lot buyers had to pay special assessments to use parcel A. And they had to prove that they were up to date on those. We no longer do that. But this is the Ohio Supreme Court finding is that the lot owners and lot buyers who paid to maintain it, and that's the reason why they have access, is if they pay to maintain it. That's a fact. That's not my opinion. We no longer use that. Now we use the general fund, which is funded by property taxes and income taxes. Is that correct, Mr. Roskis?
Mostly.
And
There
income
are other
taxes,
income sources, but those are the two.
right, but it includes income taxes, which can be anyone in the village who lives in the village, is a legal resident of the village and works outside of the village, pays income taxes that supports village, correct?
Correct.
Correct, thank you. I'm gonna, I might pleasantly surprise you. Now, I'm paraphrasing. There was no provision in the contract which authorized the trustee to set up and enforce any other role as the use of the park, so long as the park is maintained with the monies of the assessment fund. Well, it's not maintained with the assessment fund, is it? So I'm going to direct you to the pages, the first two pages that I gave you, and all these can be found in the history that was sent by Mr. O'Leary, I believe today or yesterday, and the mayor prior in February sent this out to everybody. So I'm not going to bore you. I'm not going to read through all of that material, but I just put down a couple of important points that I think are worth noting. So The original intent, Timberlake lot owners have privileges, and it was meant to keep out of town. That was the purpose. Parcel A was to be held as a park for park purposes. That's mentioned in one of the findings. We'll go with what a park is in page 2. Clear intention that those who pay assessments, oh, I crossed that out because that doesn't exist anymore. We don't pay assessments anymore. We do it through the general fund. So clear intention that those who pay contribute to the general fund and maintain parcel A should have use of the park. Resolution 1964-3, paraphrasing. I'm paraphrasing because it rambles on where the deed came from, like the owner. That's why I'm paraphrasing. I'm not I'm not moving things around to trick anyone. Let it be resolved by this council of Timberlake that if there is tendered it a deed of parcel A free of encumbrances, so that said property may be used for village purposes, that this council will accept such title and possession of said parcel A for the use of the village for such purposes as may be determined by council. Whereas hereby determined said beach reserve continue to be held and operated for the benefit of all or the residents of the village. Now, therefore, it be resolved, and this was to make the application to become trustee after they stopped the individual trustees, starting with our first mayor. To hold title, therefore, and operate said beach reserve for the benefit of the residents of the village of Timberlake. To me, this is plain as day, conditions for Timberlake to agree to take over as trustee and use public funds to maintain parcel A. We agreed to and are using general funds to maintain parcel A to be used for park purposes for the benefit of all residents. That was our resolution, and in our application to, I believe, the Common Pleas Court, we said, if there is tendered, if we are tendered a deed of parcel A free of encumbrances, so said property may be used for village purposes, then this council will accept such title of possession. We did not say, so we will pay for it with our general fund and only a subset of villagers will be able to use it. That is not what is said. And it also says, once again, use of village for such purposes as may be determined by council. Council has a say. I'm going to go to page 2, and that's the definition, which spells out that parcel A is considered a park. Definition of village park and recreation land per 1062.01, paraphrase. It names the village hall with the adjacent land, which is parcel A, as well as the other recognized park areas such as down at the end of East Shore. So it's saying all of these are our parks and recreation area. 1062.02 residency required guests. No person shall or remain on the park and recreation lands of the village as set forth in section 1062.01 unless such person is 1, a resident of the village. Not a lot owner, a resident. 2, related to a current resident either by marriage, blood, or by legal proceedings. 3, in the company of a current resident as the resident's guest, passed in 1987 and 2012. So I'm going to wait for the last page until I'm finished. Another contradiction is that we have arbitrarily made a distinction between the beach and up top. Both are parcel A. Are we going to build a fence around the entire lot and enforce parking restrictions on non-homeowners? Of course not. That would be a mess to separate the village hall from that property. Think of family day, bocce ball. Anyone who just wants to drive up and just take a look at the beach. It would create an undue burden on the village and villagers. And I don't believe any reasonable person or judge would disagree. So we are in a situation where one portion of parcel A is governed differently than that of another, at least as far as access goes. Another inconsistency is that I think we need to close is that prior ordinances that I just mentioned stating only residents can access. But what about lot owners who do not reside in the village? If someone owns property within Timberlake and is paying property tax, should they not be granted access to the beach regardless of the residency status? The recent court decision clearly states the privileged rights of lot owners. I bring these contradictions up only to illustrate that times change, rules change. The original intent is lost or reinterpreted time and time again. Speaking of an original intent, 80 years ago, there were likely no renters or very few renters in Timberlake at all. My house was built in 47 or 48. And it was one of the first on East Shore. East Shore is like our longest road with many, many houses. And it was among the first. So this was deeded more than 10 years before that. Imagine how few houses were in Timberlake. There just wasn't a lot of renters back then. The original intent was most likely meant to keep people from surrounding communities out and allow the tax-paying, parcel A maintaining residents of Timberlake to enjoy the lot and beach access. And at that time, the parcel A maintaining was through special assessments. That is no longer the case. Now the parcel A maintaining monies come from the general fund, which is everybody who pays income tax and property taxes. Let's also not forget that the beach behind the village hall is public property. It just has no safe access. Had the staircase been built behind the village hall, that would have rendered all of this drama moot. The builders probably could not have anticipated the degree of issues those stairs would cause for villagers. So anyone can hypothetically be on Timberlake Public Beach. And practically speaking, just about anyone can park on and visit up top on parcel A. It's virtually unenforceable. So the crux of the matter is really how we manage the gate and the keys. That's what separates the two. That's why this is. Considering all of the past inconsistencies, it's really clear that this council has authority to govern parcel A and even challenge the status quo legally if necessary. That's not wrong. However, I don't think council has to unilaterally, as an entity, try to rewrite the deed restrictions or challenge the recent court findings, which would be a suit. Instead, I believe we can solve this injustice within the framework of the recent court decision by simply acknowledging and empowering the rights of lot owners who extend their privileges. We already do this. Take a married couple, for example, where only one is listed on the property. An original deed restriction absolutist could argue that even spouses or children may not grant access to parcel A if not in presence of said owner. That's ridiculous. That would be absurd. To navigate this, the council has noted previously that privileges of lot owners and lot buyers can in fact be extended to spouses, children, relatives, etc. Clearly, these are implied extensions of privileged rights, and any reasonable person or judge should agree. If a property removes covered village and allows extended family or friends to live in their separate house, with money exchanged or not, are they test? If someone sublets an extra bedroom or a suite above the garage, are they just paying official resident of the village? People are
Anyone else? Anything to add? Comments?
So Airbnb. That's about it.
That's definitely. And that's. So I understand. No, big part.
What's that?
Well, I think there's a couple things. I think that the history, this one's on too. Want me in stereo here? I think the history has had sort of some ups and flows to it. That all changed with Judge Lucci's order. Because Judge Lucci's order specifically dissolved the prior trust and encapsulated parcel A to the council for specific purposes. And that was based upon the restrictions in parcel A, original restrictions, only for park and clubhouse purposes, with said parcel to be held for the privileged rights of lot owners and lot buyers of property within the village of Timberlake boundaries. So that's the standard under which I think we start. Now, the sort of the way that you have navigated around that in extending some of the rights of the owner to the renter, I think is where it gets to be challenged. Because I will tell you that if we were to, I'm certain that if we extend the rights to renters under the lot owners asking for the keys, that will be sued. There's no doubt in my mind. Now, could we prevail in 2024? Maybe so. Maybe there's enough of an inclusive tenor in jurisprudence that people will see that as being, as you do, inappropriate to exclude people when they live here and pay taxes here. But I can't guarantee that. And the question that you have to ask is how much does the village want to take on the cost of defending itself in that kind of a lawsuit? So that's sort of my initial thoughts on it. And the sad thing is, this is the kind of situation, and you know, I'll defer to Margaret if she's aware of it. This is such an unusual circumstance that, you know, normally in the law, you go and you look up and you find similar cases. I don't know other similar cases, and the reason I say that is Judge Lucci, other than referring back to the original case of 1983, lists no other authority for his decision. And however, I will note that the order signed by the judge was an order that was written by Mike Germano on behalf of Timberlake. And so he signed the order based upon what he was given, because he had a motion before the court, he granted it, and so he signed it. So before I would suggest that council begin changing the language, I'd want to do a little more of a look to see if other communities have extended and how they've extended the privileges of a lot owner to a lot occupied. If that makes any sense to me. But I'd be interested to see what.
Yeah, I haven't looked into whether there are similar cases. There are a couple things that concern me about it, is that this order is barely 5 years old. So you're not talking a long time ago, number one. Number two, if we drafted the order, we're gonna be the ones to challenge it. Not even five, I mean, just barely 5 years later. And there's, a legal term, res judicata, unless we have some really powerful, strong arguments to argue the opposite side of this, I think a judge is going to look at this and say, this has been decided. I'm moving on. If we were talking something that was decided 20 years ago, maybe you're thinking, well, times have changed, people, the nature of the community, whatever. I think it's a real hard sell. And I think that emotions are very strong here, and I think we are going to find ourselves in a place it may be hard for us to argue our way out of.
I like the way you went about it. Because you didn't challenge the underlying order. What you challenged was the application of the order. And that's the first time I've seen or heard that argument made that way. So I appreciate that. Whether that gets us past the legal threshold is what I would want to go back and take a look at. And I'm not sure I'll find anything that would help us.
So I can understand, I not. But I understand. Spirit of under the law. Allow government to directly interact with renters and sell them key and give them permission. That's like a whole other ordinance. That's saying we are totally going against the whole lot owner thing. We're saying everybody. So I can understand that argument. But as a lot owner and lot buyer, I feel my rights are infringed because I cannot allow my guests privileges. I cannot extend my privileges. What if I'm subletting my privileges? This is almost, I don't know the legal term for it, but government's costing me money. But because I did rent my house or more, if I can advertise it as, hey, my privilege, I own this lot. The beach comes with it. So this government's costing me money because I can charge less rent because you're taking away my privilege. I can extend that to someone who's living in my house as a resident village. So this is not about taxes. This is why is someone, and I'm just giving you for an example, I've been talking fight, I have no rental properties in Timberlake, tenants in Timberlake. My wife and I are both on the deed, so it's not like one of us couldn't go, the other one wasn't present. So there's nothing personal. I'm just using myself as an example, but why do we need 100 villagers, I'm sorry, 100% villagers who agree to extend my right to extend my privileges, but you don't need everyone to agree the other way around? How about I just start buying properties and like giving everything to you? What are you gonna do? Someone's gonna challenge me. I'm gonna say, hey, wait a minute, now you need 100% of villagers say I can't do that. Why is it only one way? This is my house, my lot, I'm entitled, and I can extend those to guests. I can extend my privilege. You're costing me money by not allowing them to do it. Just
Well, here's both sides of that coin. On one side that works against us is a village, as Margaret mentioned. We wrote the proposed order that the judge signed. So any interpretation of that order that we wrote is going to be held against us, right? So that's one side of the coin. The other side of the coin, what Kevin is trying to get us all to look at is, as a lot owner, I have privileges. And those privileges extend to whomever is at my property. So if I rent to, or I have, like my situation, I went to California to stay with my brother for a week. I was allowed to go swimming in his pool in his complex. I don't know if there was any restriction. But if he had a family member come and stay with him, and stayed there for 6 months, would we not allow them to have garbage pickup? Would we not allow them to have other services that are available to other lot owners as someone who's there in the residence? So I like his argument. I just want to flush it out to see if there are other areas within Timberlake where we extend lot owners' privileges to those that are renters. Now, you're not giving anything to the resident that the garbage pickup you pay for, right? We don't,
Yeah.
the Timberlake doesn't pay that.
The playgrounds, maybe, yeah. the parks.
Police
So the
protection,
playground,
police protection.
they can rent Village Hall.
Renters rent those?
By the way, the police department also monitors personal.
Residents, I think, is, well, it's how it's worded.
So I think that's where you make you can get some traction with this argument, is that if you can show that there's no other place within the amenities provided to residents, then why restrict that when this doesn't really define what the lot owner can do with the privileges that they have?
Right.
So no, like, everything's like, oh, you said, it's lot, that's a lot, he's not saying that. He said it's for the benefit of lot owners and lot owners.
God, I love your passion.
Yeah, well, actually, Kevin makes an interesting argument. I go back to labor relations language and contracts. And you would have a disagreement in terms of what particular clause said. And so, the union would take the position that it meant this, and management would take the position, no, it means this. And so you have to go back to issues of past practice, you have to go back to issues of intent, you have to go back to, and it becomes incumbent upon the person who wrote the language to determine what that intent was. Now, because of the way that it is worded, it is ambiguous in terms of privileged rights of lot owners. It doesn't say that it's only to be used by lot owners. It talks about the rights of the lot owners. And in this case, the rights of the lot owners is to have a key. Now, if I have a guest coming to my house who wants to go down to the beach, and I have a specifically issued key through the normal channels, my feeling was always that I could let them use my key to go down to the beach. Now, it is
Without you.
without me, I don't necessarily have to be there. Is it?
Yeah. You do.
Okay.
As
My
current,
marriage, but,
Well-
All right, well, so it's my son. My son's business meets from Toledo. He wants to go to the beach. I hand him the key. He goes down there.
because it says that, right? Yeah.
And it's.
Yeah, they have more of a vested interest in this. Yeah, yeah.
Better argument, but they are residents.
And they're paying taxes.
We Personally, making.
No, I get that. I get
I like the question. Well, they are paying property tax because they're paying property tax as a part of their
Pass-through.
rental. In their, whatever they're paying for rent. That's right.
And they vote here, and they vote here.
They vote for our constituents. They pay income taxes, that is goes to general fund. We use it to mow that lawn. Why are they using people's money to mow that lawn who cannot step a foot? That's.
Now, having said what I said, I'm not real sure that the village wants to take on a lawsuit either. And based on the email that we all received from one of our residents, I think I agree with Mrs. Joyce that there is no doubt that this will be resulting in a lawsuit.
Say. So it's basically, wouldn't it be, we wrote it, our council wrote it, council currently is trusted with it, right? Regulation. Right. Doesn't that mean it's up to our? What the rights and bottom of the modifier should be, not. Now, this. These are the rights.
Council can take whatever action it deems necessary as long as it follows the legislative structure of passing an ordinance or resolution. That does not mean that you're the final arbiter as to that interpretation. That is why you end up having judges like Lucci who end up having to make these kinds of decisions. Again, I think what would support the argument more is if we could begin to list what are all the amenities that lot owners have, property owners have, that extend to their guests and tenants that we currently accept in the village. And I think that's where you have to start on your argument side of why this interpretation that Mr. Thompson has suggested would make sense. Because then you're going on a reasoned basis to say, well, it only makes sense that this would extend to them. So that's one side of it. The other side is I would like to see if there are any other possible precedents out there. To see if there's some way to narrow that down, because I'm sure that if Ratnall or some of these, I'll use the term gated communities, there have to be similar types of restrictions that may have been challenged. I just don't know what they are. Anytime that you are in the litigation process, you can expect it to be expensive. In the long well, more than likely, because it would be a suit against the village, as we recently experienced. We would be in a situation where they would assign counsel through the insurance company. And that's the other thing, you don't want to have the insurance company come back and go, you know what? We're going to cover you through the end of 24, but in 25, you need to find another insurer. You guys are too expensive for us. So good luck finding somebody else based upon all of that. Well, there would be costs though. I mean, you still have a copay or that you would have to pay, and there's limits to what the policy would allow. And again, that's if they feel like that they will defend it. Because they could come and look at it and go, listen, you put yourselves in this position. Why should we defend you? So who is the plaintiff?
Yeah, it's hard to follow, but the,
The plaintiff is the village of Timberlake, so we filed this. I think probably because they were looking for some interpretation of parcel A. I don't know, I could talk to Mike Germano and find out. Did you want to add something? I know we don't normally have residents speak, but you've been very patient over.
this year, just the first one.
Not really, we get paid the same.
We don't get paid per
We don't get paid
meeting.
anymore, so don't worry about that. No, it isn't. We love to serve the village any way we can.
Here's the thing.
Oh,
One of the things,
Oh, we're
you
on.
have to understand is that council's responsibility is to do the work of the village, and then sometimes that means revisiting an issue multiple times. Because we wouldn't even have this conversation tonight if we all were somewhat unsettled by the situation we find ourselves in, right? Because on one hand, yes, we feel like there's black and white here, but on the other hand, you've got Kevin's passion for, there's a fundamental unfairness to not allowing a resident to go down to the beach. And so if that takes having a conversation every year, I'm okay with that. But if we get to the point where we actually enact legislation, we need to go in with our eyes wide open what we're walking into. I think there was a resident owns multiple properties did argue that he was entitled to more multiple keys. Multiple keys. No, but
Yeah, so
Well, it's gonna be an expensive proposition, that's the problem, so.
that's. How we are basing that up.
well, you have to go, as Margaret talked about, you look at past practices. Past practices that we've restricted that access as far as keys are concerned. What I think is also interesting is the idea that those same people that were not allowing to have a key, we let them go over here and play bocce, which is also on parcel A. So should we also be as vigilant using Kevin's argument?
We don't have.
Well, listen, how do we know, Ryan, that there aren't lot owners that have keys that they've given them to renters and they've been going down there for years?
Well, we do, wait, I mean, there's two requests here. What we do is every request, we make sure that they own the property. They have some form of identification, we might check it and then again, or they won't get the key, so.
We took
really,
the auditors.
pretty much-
But
We
you're
took the
gonna give
auditors.
those two keys to those two people. What
But these are
stops
residents.
them? What
Yeah.
stops them from giving the keys to,
Well, there's nothing, I mean, there's nothing that's gonna stop anyone.
but that's
from doing
that's the
anything, but-
point here is,
Even when the police go down there to check to see if they're a resident, they can produce a driver's license that says they live at 5 Oasa Drive. Police would leave them alone.
Well,
They
maybe.
ask people.
They don't have to, they don't have to answer that question.
That's-
I'm a resident.
That's-
I'm not suggesting that we put a bunch of scoff laws down there, but you know, I mean, it's kind of like,
Practice. We are enforcing it anyway.
One of the questions that it was asked of me was that, okay, if it's supposed to be for privileged rights of lot owners and lot buyers, okay? Well, why do we extend now that to the spouses and families? Okay, what, that goes against a deed restriction, you know, and again, we're doing anything, and again, unless you use it for Parker Clubhouse purposes, it's restricted. Now, what's Parker Clubhouse? A Parker Clubhouse is very broad, and anything that the village says it wants to do on a park, it could do, and it's open to residents, not, and again, everything was very specific. I believe at the time, I don't know, I don't think Judge DeLucci had all the backup and all the, you know, everything backed this up and knew the history, okay, and the original intent of what was going on. I think if Kevin would have been there at the time, explained the entire thing, the intent from day one, I think it would have been a different situation here. And again, this was prepared by a prior administration. Don't want to say anything good or bad, but all I know is that it was put together by a prior administration. Again, like you said, the judge probably just signed off on it.
Well, I'm sure he did.
And that's it. So, you know, again, was it really looked at? We don't know. I know this is what we have, but then again, as vague as it is, we've already taken steps to extend it because again, in our case, my wife owns the property. I can't use the beach per this, okay? But now, because the village extended those privileges to me, being the spouse and the family, okay, I'm allowed to use it. But before that, okay, if we're gonna go by just the letter of the law, by what Lucci said, I'm not allowed to use it. Now, what gave the right of the village to extend that benefit to me? Okay, and now exclude, okay, the renters.
I think part of what's going on here is, in my understanding is that it was managed by a trust, right, with a trustee. And that it wasn't until this decision in 2019 that they dissolved the trust.
Right, because they wanted to, I
Yeah.
think what they were trying to do was to get rid of the way that the trust was being handled based upon the 1983 case. The sense I got, well, that's why I want to talk to Gervon. And that they wanted the village to be responsible for it. And my guess is when Mike put this together, he just took the boilerplate language out of the deed restriction and included it in the entry. Because this was clearly written by us because it's branded with Riles and Richards. Letterhead. But, you know, you could always put a new set of stairs right over here. Has nothing to do with lot of.
Makes sense. Special assessments. If someone was being sued, if we did try to make it easier for lot owners to start practice, maybe this even certain interpretation. If they were like, they'll say, no, we did. Or if someone takes this to court, we did. The village can allow them some allowances. Perhaps it will be even looser. I would imagine it's not their intention. Right?
can I ask a hypothetical? What if you say there's 30,
Less than.
less than
The
30?
last time we.
Okay. That as our population ages and they may not want to get rid of the investment property for tax reasons or whatever, they may decide to do something like the Airbnb ladies are doing, or to just make it a formal rental property, right? If if they were, all of those renters got together with their lot owners and said, you know what, Village of Timberlake, way out of line here. We do nothing. We don't, as council, we don't try to change anything, just leave everything the way it is. And they file a lawsuit, say, hey, we're paying taxes, property taxes as lot owners. Our tenants are paying taxes yeah, because they're paying it in the rental checks. And because they work in the village or don't work in the village, they're paying income tax. Therefore, they are not being given the same rights as people who do own the property. And we as owners, as to argue your side, are not being given our full value of what our rental property is worth. Therefore, they file a suit against us, and now we have to defend this position.
Well, we choose not to defend.
Exactly.
We let the court decide the way they want. And that's always a decision that you have to make. Or you negotiate what the entry is going to look like. And so that it allows for it to get exactly what we've been talking about without necessarily.
And then it doesn't really cost us much at all. Yeah,
That's why he gets the request and they have to go through and verify.
You go on the auditor's website.
So nowhere we have.
I would have to look at it to see what it says. But, again, interpreting the rights and amenities of which a lot owner can extend to other parties has not been really looked at.
It's never been explored.
But because essentially, whatever they do, we have no ordinance or full place, force renter out, they go out beyond it. I don't think this order.
It still has binding authority. Because it specifically addresses. How we handle. Parcel A.
But someone who's contractually involved in the lot of that lot of that in bounds of order, it's a privilege of that lot, privilege of that lot. So that's what the environment. This order does not say you can't do does actually it's not say. It would be absurd to think that you can't extend it to your spouse, or to all children who visit you, or someone who is an official resident who lives in your house, whether that is a tenant or an adult child or whatever. If they're an official resident who they live in your property, I don't see how that's not within the order. I mean, if I was a speaker. If I was new to the village, and I came in and I did have my property, I had a sweet house garage, and I rented it out. I think even if I didn't say, like, oh, yeah, this is not right. Yeah, I advertise this, and it's been on the bench. As long as the residents, I'm not under the beat. That's how I would interpret it. I would just do it without being asking, if that's how I would interpret the order. The order does not say otherwise. It does not itemize exclusions.
We do have an Airbnb that advertises private beach privilege.
Right, and mine, I can fix that.
But where's the Airbnb located? East Shore? With beach access?
No. There's one there. One there.
Oh,
With the code.
no,
How do they get access to it?
I don't think they can.
I thought you said they.
It's
They
advertised
advertise
in their
it, that's what they
Airbnb.
But this ordinance we passed. Here, said a lot of. It says, if. If you interpret. that, This, that's. This should be brought out that, okay? That's the numbers.
It's kind of funny because probably the same person wrote both.
So I don't think.
Because I don't remember how many years Mike was the law director, but
You have a type of spirit about me, we have no ordinance. No resolution, strictly. This doesn't.
we have an ongoing practice of how we handle parcel A and the keys.
And that.
And if you're going to deviate from that, you're going to have to do it based upon some justification.
So.
If you're going to do it formal,
So there's practice. Set precedents. Since you can't live one way. That's how.
We have to have a reason to change, it,
We're not changing.
but you are.
How do we enforce it? That's.
we don't give keys. We don't give keys.
We're not giving keys to members. Giving it to a lot of fire. Like I'm saying, how do we enforce?
You're arguing against yourself here.
They
I
won't
agree
give
with
me
you.
a resident lot on. Again, the sign that's on the door there, it says you must be a resident lot owner to access the beach. And that's what we have inside. In order to get a key, you have to be a resident lot owner. When we check, we make sure that first of all, they're a resident and they own a lot, and then they get a key.
We don't check.
What they do with the key after.
who used it.
Well, yes, we do, because if someone's down there. When one of the officers goes down, the first thing they ask is, do you have a key? So they have to show the key, and on the key will have a stamp of their address, their street. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, the key's not enough with your ID. Where do you live? So you have to live in the village. Even if you have a key, but you don't live in the village, the officer will throw you out.
Okay, but if you're a renter, you live in the village, your license says you live in the village, your lot owner has given you the key, now you've got a key with the address,
Stamp.
and you've got a license with the address. Now what do we,
We leave you alone unless you cause trouble,
exactly,
because again, there's nothing we can do at this point, so.
And you're going to have people who show the key and they give their ID and it doesn't have the right address, and you simply say, I just moved into the village, I haven't updated my license yet. So I mean, you know, listen, the enforcement of this is a challenge. And every year we kind of go through this. The question is whether or not council wants to wrestle with this monster.
It's already been in practice. That we don't do it. Our
I
practice
wouldn't
is
say
that-
we don't do anything. I think that they are very diligent about the keys that are distributed. They monitor the beach. Now, does that mean people fall through the cracks? I'm sure they do. But there's a difference between
Functionalizing that.
inconsistent enforcement and changing the ordinance to extend those privileges in writing.
From lax enforcement. That
how would you enforce it? No, how would you enforce it? If you're going to enforce it, how do you enforce it beyond what the mayor is already doing?
What we're already doing is enforcement enough. Now, we do have some people that if there's folks that they don't recognize on the beach, though.
maybe you show your ID, the key, you can match up. But you actually not asking you for your key. No. That's already the practice we have.
Although I'm guessing that there are some officers that know which ones are the rental houses and which ones aren't. But again, I really don't want to argue with you on that part of the detail because it's, you know, we've got a system in place. It's not perfect. It can be maneuvered around.
Yes, it is. Operated perfect.
You do.
I operated
But that,
perfectly.
but the enforcement beyond you is up to the police.
The best of your ability.
They're
Exactly.
asked by a rep. Like the young lady that's. We just say.
Point them to the resolution.
it. And
We can't officially say that.
No.
They have to figure that out themselves.
As the lot owner, I'm not gonna issue them a key because they don't live in the village. So if they own the house, but it's renting to someone else, they try to apply for a key, their address, they have to live in the house.
Check.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah. I did. I said I had 2 years. I says, number one, we checked their lot owner, and number two, that they're a resident.
My question is on, a resident of the village related to a current resident either by marriage, blood, or by legal proceedings. So my daughter could come here with my grandchildren, I give them my key and they're okay, because she's my blood daughter.
Well, this is the residency requirement that's separate apart from this, right? You pulled this from several different places.
Yeah, that residency is a old ordinance. And some could argue that the recent orders received that. So some would argue that no, they probably should not be allowed, but I don't think a reasonable officer may force that against your daughter and grandchildren.
He is reasonable.
And,
Yeah, the key is reason.
and in the company of a current resident, as you said, you're not gonna come down with your grown son.
Nope.
Just gonna throw in the key. And how many people live along the lake that have guests that come that just go down whatever access way they have?
And that's kind of a personal problem, and I know it's professional possible, but I believe that, some individuals are trying to access through not just for tenants, they want these little people down there. I don't mind saying that wrong, because I think everybody knows the ins and outs, because it's true. And I think that's the truth, and I don't, the finances of going in court is unfortunate, but I believe it's injustice the way we're interpreting it so narrowly right now. And, I think that's, and that's the reason behind it. It's for their, their debating because allowing them down there. I think restricted access is, and it doesn't matter who. And Mayor and I were talking about before too, because how fair is it to general funds to repair those stairs? If not everybody is paying the general funds to use them, but if we don't repair the stairs, then we're punishing 80% of the village who do not have beachfront access property and who are not tenants. Like my wife, for example, with a 1-year-old, she should have safe access. Or a lot higher, she should have safe access to the down. We should.
But not your child. No, just kidding.
She could be down there. by the stairs.
I knew that one.
It didn't get down there fast.
Kevin, the other thing that you talked about was building another access.
But it would have to be ADA.
Exactly. Which would cost us, yeah, millions of dollars.
No, you get it.
And that would include all of the excavation and everything? Yeah.
3 years.
Only 300,000?
If it were cheaper though, or we were ratting off, and that's the issue too. The school with someone, with anyone who wants to challenge it and risk us doing something like that, because that would be public properties, then anyone could use it. We don't want to do that, but that's.
We just put a big slide
Yeah.
right over here.
Yeah.
A little bit of a bend on it, so they slow down before they hit the beach and walk.
And make them swim back.
I know.
Yeah, that's what he's saying. That's what he's saying. And it was-
So you make
Swim-
two
swim.
shirts.
That's what he
Swim
did.
over to the boat ramp. You can come right out there for free.
Feel like, Checked.
Yeah.
Because we don't want drunk people falling down that hill after they. They come here as guests at a wedding reception and they wander out there to have a cigarette. The next thing you know, they're
Just be.
wrapped around a tree halfway down. the hill.
Riptide.
But
There was a lawsuit 25, 30 years ago, and it might even be longer than that, where the pool in South Euclid had been empty after Labor Day. Some drunk guy decided he was gonna go swimming, climbed the fence, dove in, broke his neck, sued and won, against, even though it said pool closed, you know, nobody unauthorized to go in here, and he still, because there was a jury that found it. Now, I don't know where it went on appeal, but it was appalled.
So. to Kind of wrap this up, what action items, if any, do we want to take as a result of what we've learned? John, can you,
Finish all that show.
Mr. Roskis, can you make sure that that gets out to everybody?
Or whatever.
We have a key application here. Do you want him to read the?
I just see the application.
Okay,
Ordinance on.
Yeah, they were unaware.
it might even be on here.
Yeah, it should be on here.
And then I don't,
I've checked enough of them.
and then you're gonna link.
I'll see if there's any research out there about that, but I think one of the things that you guys can do is as you realize that there's things that are afforded to lot owners that extend to renters, write it down.
You want
Let's
to,
start to make a list of those items. Because we might find out that there's an overwhelming list of amenities that flow from lot owners to lot renters. And then I think it does make it harder to make the argument that it doesn't extend on this part.
That.
Well,
Right.
I think what I would do is more than likely. You would want to. Put the ordinance together, have public hearings. And go on all 3 readings before you decided whether to pass it or not. Whoever's up next for re-election.
Oh, yeah.
Send it to them.
Wrap that all up. Like,
I should have done wrong one.
Well, I certainly, everyone's concerned that we don't want to get ourselves into a suit. I completely understand. I just wanted to fight the good fight and represent people like they deserve a voice. And I don't know how we as government, mayor, council, or other villagers can go to family day, go to the village club meetings, go to and they can look a fellow villager in the eye and say, I don't think you belong in our.
Nancy will be in charge of that at the.
Set up a little
All
table
in
for her,
favor, say aye.
set up a little table for her and stuff. Come complain about the beach.
Are there any other action items other than those 2? We could ask for declaratory judgment. Related to the interpretation. But I just don't know.
I think you have to have a conversation with Mike Tremaine first. And find out what the thought process was there.
Well, I think what they were trying to do is they were trying to limit which governing body was for the parcel. Because I think if I'm reading this correctly, and I didn't, what I need to do is pull the link that was filed. But my guess is there was some conflict between those 2. And I could probably fairly easily.
Obviously, rather than,
But they would file as an intervener,
and then it would just be two copies, right?
which is what the one person that we are aware of tried to do. The court allowed it, but they didn't. They didn't.
Yes, it was that really. expensive proposition if we do it first.
It's always an expensive proposition.
So can anyone, any of the builders have themselves in part?
They can always seek to intervene. That doesn't necessarily mean that they will be admitted as a party. That's, that there, you have to have a connection to that the court believes is sufficient enough that you should have a voice. I say that properly enough? Just trying to not use legal.
In other words, if it's none of your business,
If you have no.
You don't
legal
get to
stake in
say.
it, you don't force it.
I think the court, well, in this particular case, the person who filed as an interested party had property that had beach access and lives along East Shore. So, you know, the proximity is close enough that the court might say, okay, it's like almost a neighbor kind of situation. But, you know, if the court was going to be pretty broad-based in terms of allowing interested parties, it would really be anybody in the village. Just never know. Depends on the judge. I'm reminded of my cousin Vinny, where the judge listens to his argument. He says that was a well-reasoned, well thought out, well presented argument. Overruled.
So I have the complaint. This file. They sued everybody. Well, they had the auditor, they had this, any interested party, including the council members were named. At the time, treasurer, the auditor, the court. Because it affected their right, and then Jane and John Bell, because there might be interested parties. So what happened to that? It's a very long. I'll save this and I'll send it to everybody. It might not make any sense to most of you, but.
It's always good to see you.
That's. Have one.
Yeah, even if you own three
But you don't
properties.
have to live here. You just have to- Every property owner.
Do you have a little bit of time on your hands? I think maybe you should go back.
That was a compliment, backhanded, but it was there.
All right, are we gonna adjourn here?
Is there anything else? Anyone else? Do I have a motion to adjourn? Roll call. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we are adjourned.